Have you ever had that feeling of something suddenly dawning on you and being a bit of a light bulb moment and thinking, how did I not realise that before? Oh yes, this kind of has just crept up on me really. It started off by, I was curious to know how many games I had in the collection. It's something I've always kind of wondered about. I've never counted them. And I still haven't. So let's get that out the window. But I started with the idea of thinking I would like to know how many games I had in the collection. Especially now where I feel I'm in the position that I've got everything I want. Except new stuff that comes out, obviously. But there's nothing sort of outstanding that I'm desperate to own, even though, you know, I may well buy stuff, obviously. I thought it might be a good time to take stock and find out how many games I'd actually got. And I'd also got rid of, you know, all what I considered to be surplus to requirements. So I felt I was in a position where the collection is sort of curated as good as it ever has been. And so, like I say, that started me thinking it'd be a good time to sort of tally up and see how many games I'd actually got. And this has all come about sort of while I've been reorganising everything, and you know, that's still been ongoing since Christmas, as I might have mentioned before. You know, I've been reorganising still in the arcade, and I've changed the use of that now, and that's a lot different. And I've obviously made these changes in here, and I've gained a bit of extra storage, and I've changed things around a bit to work a bit better for me with this increased storage I've got down here. And I finally got in a position where I'm completely, I've done it all now. I've done all the rooms, and I'm in a position where I can say that for the time being, I'm finished. And so I thought, right, this is the time to take stock. But it was while I was reorganising sort of certain shelves in the room, and I've moved some games, you know, from this end to that end and vice versa, and, you know, moved things around here. I've slightly reorganised the Outrun Shrine instead of having it running across here, blocking the games. I've just sort of crammed it all together really up on the one shelf. Not quite as good, but it's a bit, you know, has to be compromises. But anyway, I've ended up, I didn't plan on it, I must be honest. I've ended up with all the PlayStation games on this particular wall, pretty much all together. Because I had PS1 over there, and they were a bit of a pain to get at, if I'm honest, and I just didn't bother. So they're far better here. But however, having moved all these games, it then dawned on me that you've got a lot of PlayStation sort of Sony games in the collection. And I sort of stood back and I thought, you're a bit of a Sony pony. It's never dawned on me before. I mean, I'm Sega through and through, always will be in my mind. But obviously, you know, Sega more or less died as a company 25 years ago. You know, and there's a lot of water gone under the bridge since then. And I've always kind of considered myself that my allegiances went to Nintendo after sort of Sega and the death of the Dreamcast. And I still feel that way in my mind, really. But the collection says otherwise. So I think my mind may be wrong, to be honest, because of the amount of Sony games that I have in the collection. So what I decided to do was add up all the Sony games that I had, which is what I've done. And I'm going to hopefully my plan is, because I really want to know how many games I've got in the collection. So this is the Sony stuff. So I'm hoping to do a future videos, a small series perhaps, each focusing on, you know, this one's Sony, and then I'll do one for Sega consoles, and then sort of Xbox consoles, then maybe Atari, and then maybe another one which is all the sort of oddments, you know, like, I don't know, 3DO and Intellivision, you know, obscurities. So then at the end of all that, when I've worked all that out, I can work up a grand total of games in the collection. That's my idea. So I really want to stick to this, because I am really keen to know how many games are in the collection. However, I think I am a Sony pony, and I've realised it yesterday. So I'm just going to run through the totals of what I've got for Sony consoles, and we'll start with the PS1. Now, I thought I had a few PS1 games, and obviously going back to this period in time, it was all about imports for me, you know, until sort of after 2000, you could argue imports were way better. And so the majority of my PS1 collection is Japanese. So I've got 112 Japanese PS1 games. And then I've got a smaller selection of American PS1 games. I've got 24 of those. And then PAL games, I've, you know, never bothered with, to be honest. I've got 7 PAL PS1 games. I think they're predominantly either games I've bought for Steve's Challenge or light gun games. But however, we've got an overall total of 143 PS1 games. Now, these totals, I would imagine, are tiny in compared with what a lot of people have got. You know, there are far bigger collectors than me of everything. I like to think my collection is, there's absolutely no chaff. It's all good stuff that interests me. I don't have any crap in the collection as far as I'm concerned. Other people would think so, but each to their own. So we've got 143 total PS1 games. So moving on to the PS2. Now, if somebody had said to me prior, and I think I alluded to it in my last video actually, I would probably have said my PS2 collection was probably as big as anything I'd got. However, as it turns out, again, same principle. My majority of my collection for the PS2 is Japanese, but I have got a spread across all 3 formats. So, Japanese PS2 titles, I've got 102. Then American PS2 titles, I've only got 6 of those. Something I've never really bothered with, the American. It's only in recent years really since I got an American PS3 and I was able to play PS2 games. So we've just got 6 American PS2 games. And then we've got a modest PAL PS2 collection. We've got 34 of those. So, across the 3 regions for the PS2, I've actually got 142 games. So, remarkably similar to my PS1 collection. Who knew? Right, so then moving on to the PS3. Now, this era totally switched me off from gaming. I lost all interest. I had no interest whatsoever in 3D games, and predominantly that's what seemed to come out, especially initially. And like I say, I switched off and I really didn't bother with this generation much at all. I've subsequently found out there are some cool sort of more 2D and, you know, races that I should have played at the time, but, you know, life got in the way. I went on to do other things. So consequently, I knew my PS3 collection was quite small, especially compared with what many people might have. And I've only got, these are all sort of regions that predominantly PAL games, because obviously PS3 is multi-region. I've got, I think, a couple of outliers with Japanese and American, but I've just bundled them all in PS3 titles all together. And we have 86 PS3 games, which kind of surprised me. I didn't think I'd got that many. They are spread across the 2 rooms, because I've got some in here and I've also got some in the arcade for the driving rig. So, you know, it's probably a 50-50 split across the rooms, and I think I've gained some there by buying some races for the driving setup, to be honest, more so than what I had in the past. So, we've got 86 PS3 games anyway. That then brings us on to the PS4. Now again, I had a PS4 at the time and then quickly sold it, but then got one back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And, you know, fantastic console. And Eddie, if you're watching, thanks to all my room rearranging, the PS4 is now back on show. I'm sure you'll be delighted. It has come at the expense of Super Famicom, unfortunately. That's more obscure. But I use the discs for PS4, whereas I'm going to use the Everdrive for the SNES, so I don't need to get at the boxes. Anyway, we're getting off topic. PS4 games. I know I had, you know, a few, but again, it's going to be dwarfed by many people's. I've got 104 PS4 games total in the collection. Again, there's a bit of a mixture of all regions, again, multi-region, so it doesn't matter. So I've bundled them all together, 104 in total. That then brings us on to the PS5. Now, this is a very recent addition for me. Just have a drink. I only got a PS5 a few months ago, late last year. And I've got to say, it's kind of took me by surprise. I love the PS5. It's really, really reconnected me with modern gaming. I've got to say it. Modern gaming is back in my life, but not for AAA titles. They are not for me. It's more your kind of obscure and 2D based games. It's amazing. As the Switches, you know, it's the PS5 and the Switch really has made me, like I say, reconnect with modern games. You know, you shouldn't sort of dispel them and just say modern stuff is crap, because I did that for years and years and years, and it was wrong. You know, there's plenty of amazing fun to be had on brand new consoles if you like retro stuff, as I've found out now, and I'm sorry I've neglected it for years and years. However, back to the PS5. Like I say, I've really been amazed by it, and especially because when I first bought one, I thought there's really not many games for me. When I was thinking about buying one, I was thinking, is it really worth it for Tekken 8 and Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves and Gran Turismo? I'm buying it for 3 games. There's so much more to it, honestly. It's blown my mind, and it's still blowing my mind. And I've really gone sort of... I've gone a bit crazy on the PS5, I have to say, the last few months since I've got one. And anyway, I've ended up, so far, I've got 48 PS5 games in the collection. And I would say 90% of those, or even 95%, are not AAA sort of modern releases you typically associate with a brand new console. They are more independent style, cool stuff that appeals to me. So God knows where that collection will end up. I mean, who knows? But anyway, as a running total then, across all Sony consoles, I actually have 523 games. in the collection for Sony consoles. I'm guessing at this stage, having not counted anything else, that's going to be my biggest sort of manufacturer bias, if you like. As in, I've got most games for Sony consoles, I would imagine. It remains to be seen. It will be interesting to me, at least, anyway. But I found it quite staggering that I've got 143 PS1 games, 142 PS2 games. I mean, how close can you get? And then I've got 86 PS3, 104 PS4, and already I've got 48 for the PS5, giving me the grand total of 523. So I just found that a bit interesting and a bit eye-opening to realise that, having not done so before, I am, as it turns out, a Sony pony. Who knew? Anyway, thanks for watching if you've got this far. I'm hopefully going to do a few more of these. Be kind of interesting to hear your thoughts, or even, you know, what have you got in your collection? Do a response if you want. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see where this series runs and what I end up with as a grand total. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you're all well, and be seeing you.